Hi everyone, I'm Hector Garcia, CPA, Advanced QuickBooks Pro Advisor, and QuickBooks Solution Provider. Basically means I sell QuickBooks for a living and consult on, integrate, and train people with QuickBooks for a living. I'll put my contact information below if you want to reach out to me for any QuickBooks solution related issues. On this video, you're actually going to see a recording of a webinar I just did earlier today, where I talked about all the new features in QuickBooks Desktop 2024, which is released in October of 2023. And there's four major features in the Windows edition of QuickBooks Desktop 2024. We have improvement in the list searching. We have the new updates to the categorization, setup, and configuration for your items. We have a major feature called customer prepayments. And lastly, we have some updates on our inventory lot number reports. So I'm going to put timestamps to all of these if you want to skip to any of these, and you can see those links in the description as well. Lastly, before we get started, I want to put a quick plug to my new podcast called the Unofficial QuickBooks Accountants Podcast. Even though QuickBooks Desktop gets really major updates once a year, QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks ecosystem related products are essentially updated in a monthly basis. Sometimes it feels like there's new stuff, new news coming out in a weekly basis. And I put together this podcast with my friend Alicia Katz-Potluck, who's also a QuickBooks super expert. And every single week we break down what's in the news of the world of QuickBooks. So we'll put links to the description to that as well. So I want to put a hard plug into that. Subscribe wherever you hear your podcast. Is an audio only experience, and it's going to be much different than the content that I'm doing in YouTube. So if you love my content here on YouTube, I think you're going to love the podcast as well. Anyway, let's get started. Welcome everybody to What's New in QuickBooks Desktop 2024. Today is October 3rd, and QuickBooks Enterprise 2024 has been released for the accountants user. I have not yet seen QuickBooks Premier Accountant be released for accountants user. And at some point in the middle of October, QuickBooks Desktop 2024 will be released across the board to all users. Now, if you go into the QuickBooks website, and this is where I'm gonna do my starting point here. Is they give you a list of what all the new features are, and we're gonna go in product and work through them. But the whole thing is work more efficiently and secure with QuickBooks Enterprise. Every year they come up with a theme that they can use in their marketing that would match exactly what is happening, I guess, parallel in the technical side of the software. So we're going to talk about all the features that are available across all versions of QuickBooks Desktop, and then we'll get into QuickBooks Enterprise. There isn't that many things in QuickBooks Pro Premier, so really Enterprise is getting most of the new features. So we're going to scroll down to the ones that kind of matter. One is enhanced security and improved encryption. Long story short, QuickBooks now has 256-bit encryption, which means that if somebody gets a hold of your data and doesn't know the password, it will be very, very difficult to hack or crack, especially when it comes to getting customer information, social security numbers that you may have for your vendors, or social security numbers you may have for your employees, or bank account information or credit card information for your customers. It's just more secure. Essentially, that's the whole thing. That's across all versions: Pro, Premier, Accountant, Enterprise. They all get that. The second thing that all versions get is they get the seamless product updates. So all the updates are happening in the background, and then next time you log in, it's going to attempt to automatically do the update or the upgrade for you. That way you don't have to just keep track of updates. If you remember, QuickBooks Desktop a couple of years ago went to a fully subscription model. So it really doesn't matter anymore which version you have. Everybody's going to be on the newest version anyway. So there probably isn't a reason not to update anymore, right? So everybody should just be on the latest version. So that's pretty neat. You get automatic updates. The other feature that QuickBooks, again, all versions of QuickBooks Desktop are getting, is this thing called improved search item list, but it's not complete. Interesting enough. It works in memorized transactions and it works in fixed assets, but my version, which is R1, doesn't have it on payroll items yet. So we'll talk about that. So this is the only one that Pro Premier accountant get. These are visible improvements that you can feel. Okay, this other concept of seamless product updates and enhanced encryption. These are kind of the invisible features that most people don't really get to enjoy. But this one, improved search on the item list, is. So let's move on to the product here. So this feature of search essentially is a feature that's already existed in different areas of QuickBooks. So for example, if I go into the item list, I have a search box up here. That's already existed there for a very long time. Now, if I go into my fixed asset list, I have a full search. So for example, if I want to search, I have two assets here, so it's not a really big list. Of course, this is more valuable when your lists are pretty big. But if I want to just search the word Mac and click on search, it shows me just my assets that have that. If I want to search the word HP, click on search, it will show me just that. I can choose which area I can search in. Again, this already existed in the item list, so it's really no use to discussing it too in depth. Basically, they added to the fixed asset list, and you can search within the results too. They also added it in the memorized transaction list. So now you get a search in the memorized transaction list, and you can search within a transaction name or group name, source account as well, and also search within results. So for example, if I want to search bills, I'm going to put here bills and click on search. So that's going to show me only the ones that have the word bill or they're part of the group bill. And then I can search within results and then maybe put here land or something like that and click on search and narrow it even more. So that's pretty neat, being able to search in both the memorized transaction list and the fixed asset list. And according to the marketing material, the payroll item list got a search too. The old version of 2023 and below didn't have a search in the payroll item list. The only thing that I mentioned originally that I think maybe this is not complete is you don't get the sort of search within the search type of functionality, and you don't get that little drop down filter that allows you to do that. So hopefully in future releases they add that as well, so the search just feels cohesive throughout. And essentially, really, that's it. That's the only thing that QuickBooks Pro, Premier, and Accountant, like all versions of QuickBooks, get across the board. It's the only thing that I saw, the only thing I tested, the only thing that's being marketed. That's it. Okay. So let's talk about the stuff that QuickBooks Enterprise got. So let's go all the way to the top here. We're going to start with the big one, the really significant feature, the one that I think could encourage some people to either stay in QuickBooks Enterprise or move from some other system, which is the customer prepayments. This is huge. Okay, again, only available in Enterprise. I believe Platinum only, by the way, which is the process of doing prepayments, particularly useful for people that use sales orders and they want to get prepaid prior to fulfilling a sales order, that sort of thing. So we're going to start with the premise that we create a sales order and we want to receive a payment against that. What I like to do, however, for context, is I like to show you prior to 2024 how we have managed prepayments of sales orders in the past. So I'm going to create a sales order. I'll select the customer or job that I want to do a sales order for. I'm going to select, let's say, a couple of items that I'll be putting on a sales order. So don't mind the negative quantities for now. Okay. And we'll pick a couple of items here. So let's do, and again, we have lot numbers turned on. So we got to pick those. And let's say this is the sales order. The sales order is $358. And we want to get prepaid or get a partial payment for that. So we have the information that we typically want to keep track of. It's the sales order number. So that's sales number 153. So I'm going to hit save. And then prior to, as I mentioned earlier, prior to 2024, what you would do is you would immediately receive a payment that's not necessarily being applied to the sales order. So you would go into customers, you would go into receive payment, and you would pick the customer that you're receiving the payment for. and then hopefully in the memo somewhere you would put for what sales order it is. So we put sales order, I believe it was 153. Okay, so I had to write that down somewhere. That way I sort of keep track of what's happening. I wouldn't apply the payment to any invoice, okay, because there's no invoice yet. There's only a sales order. You notice that there's a little checkbox here that says prepayment on sales order. That's new for 2024. But prior to that, essentially, you would just select the customer or the job. I mean, the job would obviously be better. And again, this is showing an actual invoice, not a sales order. My sales order is nowhere to be seen because you can never apply a payment to a sales order. There's always been a challenge with, especially my customers that do inventory type of sales, and they create a sales order prior. So then we will go ahead and finish creating, I mean, receiving the payment. So let's say they pay with a check and check number, whatever the check number is, and then the amount is, let's say, 190. So they prepaid, let's say, a portion of it, and then I would leave it as an underpayment, and then I would click save and close. Then when I go look at my customer history, I would go and look at my customer history, and I could see, for example, the payments, and essentially there's a payment for 190, but I don't know what sales order is for. If I enable the columns here and I bring in, for example, the memo, which makes it useful to bring the memo in. We already have the customer information. There's no way to attach it to a sales order, so that information wouldn't be anywhere else to see. The only thing that I could possibly see here is that there's a memo here saying, hey, what this is for that specific sales order. Once we go in there and open the sales order, and let's say we fulfill it, we convert it into an invoice. I would go to create invoice. Let's say I invoice the entire sales order. We create the invoice. Invoice is tied to the sales order right here. You actually see the 153 there, where I could essentially click on that and look at the sales order. So the entire workflow, the normal standard workflow of creating a sales order and then fulfilling it, creating the invoice, comes in here, and then we click save and close, and then that's it. The invoice would just live there, and then we'll just switch back to invoices here. The open invoice will live here, and there's no way to attach a payment to this, or to automatically attach a prepayment to this. So at this point, I will have to go look at my history of payments and then see if there's any linkage between the invoice and the prepayment. It's one of the major challenges that we have, is that there's no direct linking to this. Now, it would help if I click on customize column and enable the memo. That would help if I could read the memo, and also I would have to have gone through the process of actually putting the sales order in here, because I don't think there's no possible way to show the sales order number here. Unfortunately, it's one of these crazy things where I could show the PO number, but if I go into the invoice itself, there's a field for a sales order number, but just for whatever reason, QuickBooks said, no, we don't need to see that field here, so there's no access to that field. So I would have to have thought about this prior and put prepaid via SO153, which we know for a fact people always forget to do that. Nobody actually does that. But if I do that, then maybe when I'm looking at the payments on the screen and I see a note here that has been prepaid, and then I switch over here into payments, and then I see here that there's a linkage to it, then I go, okay, these two things are related. Okay, that's nice. Okay, then I would have to go back and open the payment again, and then go in there and apply it. And again, QuickBooks doesn't know, it doesn't have any relationship between sales order or invoice or anything like that. So it automatically applied to some other invoice. I would have to unapply that and apply that. So it's always been a very manual process to keep track and have any sort of sanity check around the payments and the sales orders. And again, because QuickBooks auto applies and that sort of thing, it will most likely auto apply wrong. So like I wouldn't trust an auto application payments. I usually turn that off. I don't want to do any automatic application of payments. So this is how I've always done it. I've done it through memos, keep track of it through memos, and that's how we've done it. So with the new feature, so that's the context, okay? So with the new feature, the process actually, the system actually does the workflows for you, which is really nice, and it creates a temporary account where it puts the information in, and I'll take you through the whole thing, so you can see that. So let's go back to creating a new sales order. and then, and I'll pick, let's say, this one, and then I'll pick a couple of items. Okay. Of course, I'm picking the items I don't have in stock. So let's go pick a lot number here, and I'll pick another item, and let's do 12 of these. Pick a lot number. Okay, so there's my sales order for $970, and I do want to receive a payment for the sales order. Sales order 154. I am not copying and paste that into the memo. I'm not recording that. I'm actually going to use the mechanics that are built into QuickBooks for this. So I finished creating my sales order, and then I want to click on receive payment. So this is a significant change in 2024. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and receive a payment, and then notice that when I go to receive payment, the checkbox for prepayments on sales orders gets turned on. And essentially now the list of sales orders shows. So we can essentially apply. And by the way, there's no true application of payment to a sales order because a sales order is a non-posting transaction, and a payment to a sales order is actually a liability, not a negative accounts receivable. So that's something that they fixed here. So we'll go ahead and select the sales order that's being prepaid. Let's say this is being prepaid in total, 970. Okay, and then we click on save and close. Okay, so that's it. Now my sales order now has a prepayment attached to it. Now one of the semi-criticisms I have for this, and we would have to just kind of like just be patient as to when they start adding this stuff to it. I would love to see a big thing up here next to sales order that says prepaid or something like that. Now, all the way in the bottom, it says payment applied, which is a new concept in the QuickBooks world, where the sales order has a payment applied. So that's there. You can see that. That's there. And the other thing that you'll see that's peculiar is I cannot change the customer job. They lock in the customer job on that sales order just because if you change that, you're going to create a whole disaster. So that's interesting too. I like the fact that they did that. If you hit Control H on your keyboard, I love that they did that. There is a linkage to it. So if I double click on that, I can certainly see the connection between these two, which is pretty neat. The reports, when you go to sales and you go to open sales orders by customer, the reports actually show where's this one? 154. The report shows that there's an open balance pending to invoice, but there's a prepayment on the open balance. So that's pretty interesting. The fact that you get to see it on a report, right? So like you said, you get to see which sales orders essentially have a prepayment attached to them. It would be interesting if we could just filter this by the ones that have a prepayment next to it. Unfortunately, there's like no like filter for that. That would be kind of interesting. I mean, there's no open balance filter or anything like that. Again, I guess they're just getting started with this, but at least we see it here, which I love that. But it would just be cool to see. Hey, just give me the sales orders that have open balances. That would be pretty awesome. Now this 1250, I mean this 1220 that you see down here. Let me make the font a little bigger because in webinars not so easy. But if you look at this total 1220, that's the amount of prepayments that have been prepaid, but not necessarily applied into an invoice. Okay, so that 1220 is supposed to be somewhere. Traditionally, when you receive payments that were unapplied, it essentially is a negative accounts receivable. That's how QuickBooks have always treated that. Now this 1220 is actually going to go into the balance sheet in a new place. So I'm going to go into the balance sheet. And by the way, I have to give credit for Intuit for this, especially in a world where QuickBooks Desktop gets very little love and QuickBooks Online gets all the love. The fact that they went the extra mile and created this thing, it's just incredible. I love it. So I'm going to double click here. It says customer deposits. And there's other transactions in here that I've done in the past, which I think it might be useful to just delete them. This is things that we were playing with, not related to the transactions that we just did, but I'll get rid of them so you contextually only see what we just did. So we had a prepayment from before that, again, it's in our balance sheet. Let me go back here for a second. It's in our balance sheet here for customer deposits at 1220. Double click on that. There's my two payments. I can double click on the payment and see the payment. I can see exactly what sales order is being applied to. If I hit Control H, I'll be able to double click on the sales order and go back and forth. So again, I mean, the fact that QuickBooks developed a new feature that's extremely cohesive with its existing UI and UX, it's amazing because I haven't seen this in QuickBooks Desktop new features in a while, and I love it. This thing works incredible. I mean, they literally put this negative AR in a current liability. I mean, like that's big. That's really big. I know that a lot of people are listening to me and saying, "Oh, well, that's just normal." No, let me tell you something. For a QuickBooks developer to like somehow figure out how to get a negative accounts receivable to land in liabilities, it's a pretty big deal, and it's cohesive to what accountants want, and it's friendly towards how we want the financial statements to look at, because most of these things would be just sitting there in negative AR. Now, one of the things that we're still trying to figure out, like again, and when I say we, I am a beta tester. I've been testing this feature for a very long time. This feature has been in my wish list for about 7 years. Some Intuit folk consulting me on the building of this feature. I don't want to take any credit for it, but I had my voice and my thoughts and my feelings throughout the entire development process of this thing. So like I'm very proud of what they've done. But the thing that we're still trying to figure out is what would this look like in an AR report? And I don't know. I'm still thinking exactly what that would look like. So right now, there's no negative AR showing in the AR report, and that's done sort of by uh, on purpose. So an AR agent report or a customer balance summary, I would say, customer balance summary, will still match your AR. So there's no space in this report to put those prepayments. One of the things that I suggested, but it's very difficult to do from a technical level, it would be kind of neat to see like two columns, the stuff that matches with AR and the stuff that matches with customer deposit. That would be out of control, amazing. And then having a net of the two, so like sort of the net AR, that would be interesting. But for the time being, that's just very difficult to achieve. And I wouldn't hold my breath thinking that that sort of report would exist. So you would still have to look at customer balances in two places. An AR report, sorry, not sales by customer, what am I looking at? The customer balance summary. Where's the customer balance? So you will still look at the customer balance summary, one report, and then you would look at the AR aging, sorry, customer balance summary, or the AR aging in one place to look at stuff that matches AR, and then the open sales order report to look at the deposits screen. So that's kind of where we are with that. It would be interesting to just get to see a list of the open unpaid customer deposits. We'll explore what that looks like as we go through the next step. Okay. Now this report, you can group it by customer too. So just like sort of traditionally how we manage like trust accounts and client money type of accounts, once you start matching those payments to invoices, the balances go away here. So I'll show you that as well. Let me exit out of these other screens, and I'm just gonna leave these two reports up here. Okay, so let's have these two reports. So essentially, these are the two reports that we're seeing here. We got the detailed report on our customer deposit liability, and then we have our balance sheets for 12/20. So now let's start applying some of those payments. So let's go into one of these sales orders. So let's go into this one, and we'll click Control H, and we go into the sales order, and we can close the payment. You don't have to have the payment open. Then we're gonna go through the next step, which is go to create invoice, create the invoice, and we'll deliver the product, fulfill the product, whatever it is, and then we'll click on save. Okay, and then it tells you, hey, there's available credits to apply to this invoice. Would you like to apply them? And then when I click on yes, it actually knows that there was a sales order attached in the workflow, and it's going to actually apply it into that invoice. So it automatically does this for you. And let's just kind of prove that. Let me hit cancel for a second. I'm gonna duplicate this invoice, and we're gonna bring this backwards, maybe a day, and then we'll change a couple of things here, just to kind of show you the thing. And then this one doesn't really have a link to a sales order in any way, shape, or form. So we'll click on save. Regardless of how many invoices you do for that client, you're always going to have that open credit. So when I click on yes, essentially it doesn't automatically apply. So it does tell you, it does show you there are other credits available for this customer, and you can override and essentially bring that credit from that other sales order that has nothing to do with this invoice, and you can bring it and apply it to this invoice. However, it's not a natural workflow. The natural workflow would be the one that says available prepayment credits for this invoice recommended in uh, in brackets there. So that's essentially how we should how the workflow should work. So let me go back into the sales order again, and then we go back into the invoice again, and then I'm going to apply the credit. Okay, and then it's right there, available prepayment credits for this invoice. So this screen prior to 2024 only had the two listings at the bottom. Now it's got three. Now my challenge with this is that this screen cannot be expanded. So it's kind of things that drive me crazy. Like I can only see 3 lines per box in this case. So I wish, maybe they had tabbed and put each of these sections on each tab so I can see a full listing. Sometimes I'll have tons of payments in there and like it's a pain in the butt to like scroll up and down. So I just wish this screen had more flexibility in terms of being able to see more than 3 lines. But regardless of that criticism, the workflow worked straight. It automatically applied the sales order payment to that invoice, which is amazing. Okay, so we'll click on done, and then we'll click on save and close. Now, what happens on the accounting, it's pretty interesting. It's worth looking at. You notice that originally this client had a balance of 970, now has a balance of 0 because we applied it into an invoice. And the customer deposit, the customer prepayment, got adjusted via a journal entry. So we'll look at that journal entry. And essentially what the journal entry does is it moves things from customer deposit into the account prepayment transfer. So I showed you earlier sort of the manual process on how we receive the payment against no invoice and it would be negative AR. There used to, some people didn't do it that way. They actually receive a payment against customer deposits and then at some point adjusted it via journal entry just the way you're seeing it here, or created a negative item in the invoice that would grab it from customer deposit. That's another workaround for the deposit. The problem is you wouldn't be reminded of that through any report, so it would still be a very manual process. This is really neat because you actually get to see how they used existing workarounds and made it into a real the real solution. So this journal entry is being created and it's moving it from customer deposit to account for prepayment transfer. Now, what's interesting about this one, I'm going to hit Control L for a second, is that this is automatically an inactivated account. And if I try to delete it, it will tell you, hey, I can't delete it because we're actually using this account. And if I double click and look at the history, I'm going to essentially see all the adjustments to customer deposits flow through here. So we're going to see the first journal entry that moves it from customer deposit to account for prepayment transfer. And then we're going to see another journal entry that reverses that moves it from account prepayment transfer to accounts receivable. Now, why doesn't it go straight into accounts receivable? I don't know. I don't know why the original journal entry just doesn't go from customer deposits to accounts receivable. What I'm going to suspect is that traditionally in QuickBooks Desktop, you cannot have more than one AR account and one AP account per journal entry. Okay, you can't. It just doesn't let you. It's mechanically impossible. So what I'm going to suspect is that this customer deposits account, even though it's an other current liability, QuickBooks still sees it as accounts receivable. Therefore, it won't allow me to have two accounts receivable type of accounts, customer deposits and accounts receivable. That way it needs to use this bridge account or this clearing account to run it through, which is why this weird account called account for prepayment transfer is created. And essentially that stuff is always going to be to 0. Hopefully there's never ever something in that account. Just for the heck of it, let's see if QuickBooks allows me to do a journal entry into that thing. So just interesting exercise on this. So let me copy this. This is disabled, so I'm just going to copy it. And then, because I haven't tried this specifically, So let's go into company. Let's go to journal entries. And let's see if QuickBooks lets me do a journal entry into this account. Let's see. And then to make this even more cringe, we're going to adjust that against retained earnings. So we'll click on save. Okay. But the warning is about retained earnings, but not about the transfer account. And I click OK. So there's a bit of a logic problem here, which is QuickBooks still allows you to fudge with this account. So like my general criticism would be to lock that account somehow and don't let people use it. Again, like you kind of have to be very astute to go in there and if even if the account is inactive, to copy the name. Like you have to kind of really go out of your way to try to mess this account up. But the reality is it can be messed up. It does allow you to mess that up. So I'll delete that. Okay, so that's fine. It lets me delete that error. I'm wondering if it lets me delete these adjustments. Okay, good. So now it says I can't delete it because there's a prepayment account associated with it. So essentially, they did figure out how to lock your ability from screwing up or messing up the journal entry, but you can still use the account and you can do things with that. Let's see if it allows me to change the dollar amounts. I guess I haven't tried this. Okay, it doesn't let me edit it. Good. Okay, good. So the inability to edit, it's a good thing. Just the only issue is you could fudge with the account and enter things in it automatically. Then we'll go back and look at the report again for the sales orders. So the open sales order by customer. And then it's only that other sales order that was previously created, the one that's in there. Okay. If I double click on that, it opens up the sales order. It doesn't open the customer deposit report. As I said, there is no customer deposit report. Like there's no specifically report that sends you straight into the customer deposits. It's just not in there. There's this thing called open prepayments by customer. That would be essentially the closest thing to it. So it does show you that it's filtered just with the open prepayments. So it wasn't a filter on your open sales order report. It was essentially a separate report with open prepayments. So that's useful. And you can run some filters here, which is pretty neat as well. So there's this thing called prepayment balance that is available in this report. But if I open up my sales order, this I haven't tried, open sales order by customer, is there a menu for prepayment balance? So there isn't. So interesting enough, there is a filter that exists called prepayment balance, not available in the open sales order by customer, but it is a filter in this new report called open prepayments by customer, where you can essentially also show prepayments that were closed. So you can see kind of both sides of the coin here. You can see the things that were paid, the things that have not been paid or applied in this matter, or in this case would be either as well. So I find that really interesting. I mean, again, these reports could have some improvement. They're not perfect, but they get you there. The information is there. I don't know where else you can see that prepayment open balance filter. Maybe it's just limited to that report. I would have to play with QuickBooks some more to see that. And then the original report that I showed before was me just essentially just double clicking on the customer deposits and looking at the history. So one of the common questions I get is, Hector, is there a way to like hide these customers that have a zero net balance? And the answer is no. There's no way to hide them, unfortunately. So like when you look at a detailed report, you're gonna see the entire history and all its glory. It would be nice to be able to hide anything that has a net balance of zero. That would certainly clean up the report. In theory, let me see if I go to custom reports and filter and go into paid. I don't know. I don't know if we'll get lucky enough where maybe a paid status and we do open, see if that will help. So I'm going to say, in theory, you might be able to just do that. I haven't tested it enough. I mean, this thing just came out like last week. So I haven't tested it enough with like a real file with tons of information where running that particular filter, the page status open, can essentially just give you can give you all the ones that are open and avoid showing you the ones that have balances in there. What other people do, and assuming that this paid status doesn't work, what other people do, and this is kind of an advanced feature not related to 2024, but I think it's fun to show either case, is you you can reconcile an account. So, for example, if I was going to reconcile that customer deposits account, I know it's kind of a weird concept. It's like that's not a bank or a credit card, but if you were to go in there and reconcile these things down to zero, every time you go in there and reconcile down to zero, again, assuming that open filter is not good enough, you can just go in there and reconcile them. And what's cool about reconciling them is that then you have one more thing you could do, which is you can go to customize report filters, and then you can go to clear status, and you can either hit yes and only see the ones that have been, so basically only see the ones with a zero balance, or the click on customer report and then do no, and then essentially only see the ones with an open balance. So just in case, again, traditionally, all these clearing type of accounts, trust accounts that we did for attorneys, any sort of company that manages client money, title companies, that sort of thing, that would have this liability account that you only want to see the ones with open balance. That clearing, that reconciling function is the sort of traditional way of doing it. But that filter seems pretty interesting, the open payments filter. But again, I don't want to tell you that it works 100% because again, I haven't tested this with enough customers to tell you, yeah, there's no glitches with that filter. I mean, this is all really new. Okay, so that's essentially customer prepayments. The big feature, like if somebody were to ask me, is it worth updating to 2024? At the end of the day, I mean, like you're not making, it's not a financial investment. Like you're already subscribing to enterprise anyway, so might as well just upgrade to 2024. But back in the day, when people bought QuickBooks and it lasted 3 years or whatever, and then they made the conscious decision to upgrade, the golden days, right? To upgrade to the new version. Then our job was just kind of just take a look at the new features of the last 3 years and evaluate, is it worth it forking up another $5,000 or whatever QuickBooks Enterprise costed. So that's no longer an economic decision that we have to make generally. However, I would tell you, is it worth updating customer prepayments? Absolutely. This thing is incredible. I mean, I would say in the last 6 years or so that QuickBooks has released new features for desktop. Almost everything has some sort of glitch, something missing. This is the most complete and the most useful and the most pertinent. And I like to thank the developers personally for taking on this project. New enhancement to QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise that I have seen in a very long time. So awesome. I'm just really, really happy to see this so well executed. And I'm sure it's got its flaws, but I mean, this being release one is incredible. Let's go to item category enhancements. Okay, and essentially this says you can manage your inventory more effectively with a comprehensive multi-level categorization. This was added in 2023, by the way. Item categories was added in 2023. What they've added was the ability to do bulk edits and to copy and paste from a spreadsheet and to be able to use it in advanced pricing as well. So those are sort of the improvements to item categorization. So let's share that. Okay, so let's go into our item list. And one of the challenges that we've always had with QuickBooks is having item categories. So traditionally, we've had to do this crazy thing, which is creating a list that has items and sub items. And it has, I mean, it's worked. I mean, it works. Item and sub items works for the most part. It's a fairly organized way to organize your items. It's kind of a pain sometimes to import items that have sub items or to batch edit them. And some reports are flexible with items and sub items and some are not. So this discrete separate option to create categories, I think is a good one generally. So I'm going to right click somewhere on the screen, click on customize columns, bring my category information in here. I'm going to move it all the way up so it's a bit more obvious. And now all of our items essentially have a category. I can filter by the category. There isn't a discrete searchable category, but it would be an all fields category. So for example, this one's under fixture. So if I just type here fixture, it will search everything in it. Unfortunately, I can't say just search for that particular category. That would be nice. There's a different area where you can do sort of category organization, but that gives you a general idea more or less on like the value of categories. If I double click on the item to edit it, there's a category associated with the item. For some reason, that was under categorize. We'll check that later. Maybe I have the screen open, but let's go in the item list and let's go into this one. Yeah, I don't know why I can't edit the category here. That's a little bit weird. We'll go back and check that in a second. But I'm going to open up the category list, which is a different screen, where essentially all the items are organized by either category name or this default category called uncategorized. Now I can create multiple categories here. So let's do lights, and then we'll do, I don't know, we'll call it hardware maybe. Okay, so we got 3 categories. We got lights, hardware, and fixture, and everything else is sitting here in under categorize. You can categorize inventory parts, non-inventory part services. You can categorize everything. So I'm gonna grab these 3 here that are services, and these I would say, and these 3 that are services, and these last 3 in the bottom, and I'll also put them in a new category so we can reclassify them to a different category, and we'll create a category called services. So that makes this easier to work with, and then click on save. So I essentially moved all those things into services, cleaning up my uncategorized list. Then I'll grab whatever else I want to bring in, and then you can uh, organize. I mean, sort them by date. Okay, so or I could grab a whole category if I want to, and then go to batch actions and move that into let's do fixture. Put that into fixture, save. Okay, and then we'll grab these ceiling fixtures and also move this into fixture. So notice that I have both a category and also an item and sub-item grouping. So what's nice about this is you can have your own sort of logical item and sub-item grouping, but then you can have this higher level category serving essentially as a report or a grouping mechanism later on. So these chandeliers, we'll put these under lights. Okay, and then these specialty bulbs, we'll put these under lights. Okay, and then these 2 wires, we'll put this under hardware. Cool. So now I have my all my inventory is categorized and grouped by its category. There's nothing under uncategorized. Here where it says manage categories, I can again add a new category. We've already done that. Or I can do add edit, which is pretty interesting. So with add edit, I'm gonna go to inventory parts, and all my stuff is now organized by category. I can sort by category, not necessarily by item name, which is interesting too. I could also search. Now, one thing is, I wish I could just just filter and search that specific category. Unfortunately, it's just not possible. Like if I do a search here and I type fixture or something like that, and I happen to have something else that's not in the fixture category with the word fixture anywhere else, it would show up. So there isn't a discrete category filter. That would be nice. The closest thing to that would be in here, where you can just click on the category and only see those. Now you can export a report of the items, and this contains everything essentially. But when I go to customize report and go to filters, that should be here. The category should be here. So I can just choose hardware and click OK, or I can just choose, let's say, lights and click OK and just see those. If you're going to do cycle counts, I don't mean specifically the QuickBooks version of cycle counts. I just mean cycle counts in general, where you're going to categorize and organize your counts based on like this category. It's really interesting. Again, this is probably not a world in which you would use both the categories and the items and sub-items. Again, this particular file happens to have items and sub-items, but it's a good illustration that you can use both. And category could be its own thing, and item and sub-items could be its own thing. I have clients, for example, that categorize these by brand name. So all the brands are categories, and then the items and sub items are like the type of product that it is, or the other way. The category is a type of product like this: hardware, fixture, lights, and then the item and sub items are brands. So this, like, if you actually really truly think about it, um, you you do need to think about this. This is where the consultant comes out. This is the exciting part about being a consultant in a QuickBooks enterprise world, where depending on how you configure your items, sub items, default classes, categories, subcategories, you can really provide some interesting reporting options. Now, with this add edit, I just want to add on the add edit front, I'd edit here multiple. If you were to export this, there's no like built-in export in here, but if you were to export a list of product, or let's say you want to import a list of products back in here, you can import them with categories and everything. Now, reports related to categories. So if you go to sales, for example, sales by item summary, now things are broken down by category. So if I just compress these things, and I'll do all here, compress them. Right? If I compress these things, then you get to see everything again, not by item and sub item, by category. And then inside the category, you get to see the item and sub item if you want to. Now, one thing that I don't like, and something that I've given QuickBooks my feedback on, is I wish I could disable categories in this report, because there might be times where I don't want to see them broken down in categories. I don't need to see the categories. I want to see the traditional item and sub item organization. So it would be nice if you could do such a thing. You just can't at the moment. So once categories are on, that becomes the overarching way that these sales get organized. On the other inventory reports, like a stock status report, so inventory, stock status by item, that also gets grouped in this case by category. But what I don't like about this is you can't collapse them like the way you can do in a sales by item. Now, why in the world would Intuit do this, where in what report you can collapse and the other report you can't collapse? I don't understand. I don't know how logic works through these designers. Like again, I praised them a lot for the customer prepayment. That was amazing, perfectly executed. Why can't you just like add the same UI across all the screens in QuickBooks? So like, I hate the fact that I can't collapse them. Two things: I hate the fact that I can't collapse them in the stock status report the way I'm able to do it in a sales report. I also hate the fact that I can't temporarily disable them so I can see everything sort of the traditional way prior to categories. So that's my mini rant on that. So both praising the categories because they're awesome, but also sort of pointing out some of the things that is missing. And I don't have time to get into that, but if you have advanced pricing turned on, um, uh, you could also use the category itself as a way to do your pricing. And that's a huge thing if you use advanced pricing, because these logical categories are probably the things that you're going to be using to do pricing rules. And the last thing that they added is, if you have lot numbers, they added lot numbers as part of your reports. So um, if you have inventory, if you have lot numbers turned on in your inventory, traditionally when you run a lot report, and it's easier to show you than to just talk about it. But so the reports that I was going to mention here is for lot numbers. So traditionally, if you run an inventory valuation, inventory stock status by item report, it would just look like this, and you wouldn't know if you have X of one lot or Y of another lot. That information was never available. The only information that was available prior to 2024 was this thing called lot numbers in stock, where you would then see all your items, and then you would see what are the lot numbers associated with the items. You could double click on it, and then you get this weird little box, and it'll let you know what the lot numbers are. That has existed ever since lot numbers were created. I guess that's kind of decent. It's just not very useful to have to drill down and click on each one. So the solution they came up with, which is actually really good, is this one called inventory stock status by lot number. So when you click on that, now you get to see the item, and then you get to see the quantity for each of the lots. I do have some criticisms here. So for example, one, I don't have this grouped by categories. So like, what was the point of forcing my category grouping on my sales by item report and my inventory evaluation report, but don't allow me to see it here? So that's sort of my issue number one I would have with this. It's like, why are categories not a thing here? I like the fact that I get to see expiration date. That's something that was added last year. So if there's an expiration date that shows, that's a beautiful thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. No criticism with that. I can't double click on any of these to see the history. Like, it would be so awesome if I could double click on that and see the history on how that lot number appeared in my accounting. That would be awesome. It would also be nice to be able to add columns like the valuation. Like, it would be nice to see value by lot number. Although it's all going to be average cost or FIFO anyway. It won't be, per lot number valuation. But it would be nice to see that too, because we don't have a valuation report. By lot number. That's just not a thing. The regular valuation report doesn't have lot number information associated with it. I guess it's not important generally, but I think it would be nice to do that. I don't know yet, and I could try to, before the webinar ends, try to hack this thing. I haven't yet tested this with multiple inventory sites. So I really don't know if, let me just do multiple inventory sites really quick. I really don't know if you can get both inventory sites and lot numbers in the same report. So I guess we'll find out in about a minute. So let's do reports. Let's do inventory valuation. I get an inventory summary by site. Okay, so that's available. Of course, that's always been available, but there's no lot number information. And then we have inventory lot number. Okay, inventory stock status by lot number. If I click on that, I don't get to see the site. So what I'm missing, which would be nice, is for me to be able to pick which inventory site I want to check lot numbers for, because then if I have multiple inventory sites and lot numbers, then I need the full richness of that information. So essentially, in my opinion, that's missing as well. I mean, I might be getting a little bit too demanding. This is release one of QuickBooks Enterprise 2024. I mean, maybe by release three, which is usually when they release more stuff, they'll fix all these things. All the feedback has been provided to Intuit. If you have mechanisms to give them feedback, I recommend you give them the similar feedback that I'm proposing here, because I think that would be useful. And that's it. That's QuickBooks Desktop 2024. Nothing very exciting for the Pro Premier side. Enterprise, I gotta say, even though it's not a lot of new things, everything is useful. Everything is forward-looking. My clients are manufacturers, wholesalers, e-commerce, anything that has to do with better information of lot numbers, better information of site-specific stuff when it comes to inventory, grouping of inventory by categories, all that stuff is it's always welcome. Okay, my clients, um, they rely on me so much to help them manage their business. They rely on me so much to help them make sense of the inventory. Messy inventory is quite frustrating for business owners. It's probably the reason why they fail in the first place. They don't know how to manage their inventory. And QuickBooks has been the weapon of choice that I've used for so many years, 15 years to be exact, as the way I help them manage their business. So I have a very rewarding, long-standing relationship with QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise, and I'm glad to see that it survives another year. I'm glad to see that even though if you were to call QuickBooks to try to buy QuickBooks Desktop, they're gonna push you hard into online, because most of the salespeople have only been trained online and they really don't understand enterprise well unless they route you specifically to someone that knows enterprise well. So there is still the general push and feeling that QuickBooks wants to move everybody to QBO. But even though Pro and Premier, which by the way, it's very difficult to like try to buy. Like if you go in the QuickBooks website and you go like try to find Pro and Premier, like if I click construction and contractors, which would be a good type of client for Pro or Premier, if I click on that, I don't get like sort of a direct link to, hey, you can buy QuickBooks Pro or Premier. It's like it's really nowhere here. And if you actually try to do anything, it would either be Enterprise or QBO. I mean, actually, I'm glad that they're not pushing QBO on this one particularly. So, bottom line, they haven't killed QuickBooks as the Pro Premier, because you can call QuickBooks, even though it's hard to find here. And again, it's very difficult to find something in the website. I mean, I'll dare you to go find it where they're actually talking about Pro or Premier. Like, you really have to go search and find. And if you find somewhere where they have it, that's interesting. But almost everything you're gonna see is it's QBO and Enterprise. And if you call the 1-800 number for sales, that could be a good exercise for you to do. Just call and see how long it takes for somebody to actually give you a price for Pro Premier. Um, so it's there. They still sell it. You can still call the 800 number and buy it. I'm a reseller. I can't resell it. They took it away from our ability to resell it. So even if we were to resell it or recommend it, we can't make a dime as a reseller. So we're stuck in the QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Enterprise world, which I don't mind, because I search for the larger clients that are in QuickBooks Enterprise anyway. So kind of like the silver lining of this whole thing is that there would be two types of customers that use QuickBooks. I guess it would be QBO users and Enterprise users. And Enterprise are higher value, and they typically pay more for consulting services. So that's kind of a silver lining. But it saddens me to see that Pro and Premier, even though they haven't been killed, they seem to be close to being on the chopping block. And there's no specific date in which QuickBooks has said, "Yep, as of this date, Enterprise is dead." I mean, sorry, Pro Premier is dead. That has not been said. Most of the QuickBooks executives will tell you, they will sort of double speak. They'll say, "Hey, we're not killing desktop, and we will only have it available while customers still want it." Okay, well, okay, but the problem is, how are customers going to want it if it's not even listed on the website? So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. Okay, where, yeah, I mean, true, like, okay, if customers continue asking for it, you will still sell it and not kill it, but your marketing doesn't even show that it's available. So again, kind of bittersweet moment, for Pro Premier in 2024, especially for resellers. But I'm still excited that Enterprise got a big boost. Anyway, I don't think I have any pending questions. Thank you very much for attending. I'll be editing this a little bit and posting it into YouTube a little bit later on. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.